Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this edition of the Burn and Rubber Racing Podcast for Monday, February the 17th, 2025. Today is President's Day in the United States, a federal holiday that, well, federal workers recognize and not a whole lot of others outside of that recognize. But nonetheless, we're here. Sterling Price, Hal Leestep, Justin Palmer. It is the first day after the Daytona 500. A lot to discuss from this race. Where do we even begin with this, honestly?
There's really not a good place to begin with this because I'll go ahead and start it off by saying this. It was a good race for the standards that we have expected out of the Daytona 500. Yes, we had rain. Yes, that put a damper on things. But in terms of the path that we have gone down with the Daytona 500 over the past couple of years, it was good. We had a bunch of things that we wanted and that didn't happen. Or we had a bunch of things that we wanted that we got. We wanted a green finish. We got a green finish. We wanted less than 2 overtimes. We got less than 2 overtimes. We had a quality winner. We got a quality winner. We had a little bit of rain, but we were able to get the distance through. So, with all that in mind, great 500, right? 57 lead changes, is a lot of passing, guys were able to move. Great 500, right?
Kind of.
Can I comment on this with a Tomlinism? This felt like the standard is the standard.
I'm glad we're on that same line of thinking because that's how I felt watching this, especially down near the end of the race. For starters, William Byron is now a 2-time winner of the Daytona 500, going back to back. This one, I hate saying that it kind of fell in his lap and he on a silver platter, but that's exactly what happened. He crossed the line on the white flag lap, either 9th or 10th, and he had worked his way up to 7th. The pack was starting to get really squirrely in front of him. Austin Cindric had led most of the race. Cindric led the most laps at 59, I believe, and was out front on the white flag lap, but you knew that the pack behind him was going to be moving around to try and do something. Denny Hamlin was the first car behind him. Hamlin, of course, looking for his 4th Daytona 500, trying to tie Cale Yarborough in that regard. Hamlin was just the first guy behind him. That's all it was, just the first guy. But there were so many others behind him that were going to make some moves, that were going to do what they could to try and get out in front. You knew that it was gonna, just the way they were moving around, especially late in the going, you knew it was not sustainable. And I've watched a lot of 500s before where I just knew, I knew something was going to happen. The powder keg was going to explode. So this is the last lap, okay? Austin Cindric in front. They take the white flag. Riley Herbst gets turned out of the pack into the infield. I think it's turf now.
No, it's still grass.
Amazing. But he goes down to the grass, saves it, which props to Riley Herbst for saving it, because that would have been a big caution otherwise. But nonetheless, they keep it green. Cindric still leading. Hamlin trying to position himself. You've got Corey LaJoie and Cole Custer behind them. Then Hamlin makes the move down the backstretch. Cole Custer gets a run. Custer, he goes to the outside. Chase Briscoe is behind Hamlin. They start pushing on each other. Custer comes down. They all run out of room and they all crash. And sneaking by on the outside as Hamlin spins around right there. If you're watching us via video, you'll see William Byron, the first car on the outside line, making his way around the wreck, gets past the crashing cars. Tyler Reddick gets clipped by Denny Hamlin as he comes by, but he was sandwiched between Hamlin and the wall, but that slowed him up. just enough where I think it affected Reddick catching Byron at the end. And ultimately, William Byron goes on to pretty much take an easy 500 win once the wreck happened. And notice they didn't throw the caution either, which that's a story. That's another talking point. But I mean, we saw that finish. I saw how they were racing, how they were moving around. It's something I've come to expect from Daytona. Everyone just loses their minds on the last lap. They start slam drafting each other, not bump drafting, slam drafting each other. And the drivers with these cars, some of them feel invincible, and they try to make these outrageous moves. And one thing leads to another. You get desperate guys doing desperate things that they otherwise wouldn't be doing, and you can't contain it. I mean, it's not sustainable to keep that going long term, and they crash. I've come to expect it at this point, and frankly, that's not a good thing.
That's what I thought at the end of the race was I really would love to sit there surprised and go, that was a wacky, wild finish, and what a way for it to end. But instead, I sat there and went, yeah, that was inevitable, and we all saw it coming. The only thing that surprises me this weekend is they didn't throw the yellow immediately, which, again, different standard. We talked about it before the race for the 500. When it comes to a wreck at the end, they don't throw it because they really don't want you to talk about the next day how that yellow ruined the end of the race. They would rather have everybody wreck and race to the end. This was, it felt like just your average Daytona 500 finish now. That's really not a good thing for it to be. You would rather have, I don't know, it's hard to look back and think of finishes that weren't this when I look back now. In 2007, that finish was very special because we did not expect a race to end in that amount of chaos. Today, if that finish happened, I'd go, yep, that is just like the last 7 500s I've watched, it feels like. It's not special, and that's not what you want to say about your most special race of the year is that the ending is never special anymore. The thing that really stood out to me was Cole Custer tried to make a move. And Cole Custer in the last 15 laps of this race was something to watch, I'll tell you what. He was pushing guys in ways that I don't think any of them really wanted to be pushed, but it had an effect that they got pushed ahead of the pack and then off of his bumper into the wall. And that was the way his race was going, and that's kind of indicative of the way a lot of these guys are. They're good pushers, is what you say for the first 180 laps where they're normal, and then they start getting that little bit of unease that, oh, it's coming down to the wire. Oh, I got to be in the position where I've got to win. And then suddenly they go from a good pusher to the most aggressive pusher in the world, and you can't handle it, and you're in the wall, and the big one started, and you're the first guy to get wrecked. The guy who pushed you didn't get wrecked, and you're probably a little mad at him afterwards. It's not just Cole Custer. There are a lot of guys who tend to push very aggressively and make aggressive moves, but that was just the last of the aggressive moves for the race. Notice how it didn't work either. Notice how it never tends to work, and you don't have one move in the last decade that you can point at the Daytona 500 that makes you go, that was an amazing super speedway move that shows his skill on this track. That was what I came away with was William Byron won this by not making a move. He won it by surviving again. That's not how we should be determining winners. He's a worthy winner because he's a very good driver. On every other track, he's won this twice in a row. That's not a fluke. But you never looked at it and said William Byron made a move that you're going to remember for the rest of your life.
No, and the moves that I remember William Byron making during this race were him getting behind Bubba Wallace and that third row for the largest portion in that final restart or before all the chaos happened with the cautions. That row just kept going backwards and backwards and backwards. And you were just sitting there and going, dang, these Chevys are not good when they're lined up with next to each other, and they're not great pushers, but that's less to do with the way the drivers are when Chevy and more with the fact that Chevy is still using the same car that they've had since the inception of the Gen 7 car. That's going to change next year. and they're still having that rounded bumper that they're not shooting square or to the back, which causes them to go to the back. That's not tangent aside. That's what I remember about William Byron in terms of moves throughout the race was the Chevys trying to line up on the outside and not working. I don't recall a single move that he did to really earn this win. I think of Chase Briscoe trying to make moves to get to the win. I think of Denny Hamlin trying to make moves to get to the win. I think of Cindric trying to make moves to get to the win. And we have said time and time again, Hamlin and Cindric are masters at these plate tracks in making moves and trying to make it towards the front. And they did an excellent job. And, you're sitting there with, during that, stretch between the end of stage 2 and that debris caution that pretty much got everybody gun on fuel. You had Kyle Busch, you had Ryan Blaney, and you had Bubba Wallace leading the pack. Everybody was minding their P's and Q's. You felt like those guys were controlling and managing the race. But we also know they were at 70% full throttle. And then once that debris caution came, you knew what the formula was going to be. You knew it was going to be, we're going to get a wreck with about 10 laps to go because someone's going to do something stupid. Check. We're going to get another caution with about 5 to go. Because it's go time, the aggression's up, and it's time to go win the 500. Got that. That sets up an overtime restart or a 2-lap to go restart. This one was an overtime, but only by a lap. And we're going to either get to the white, or we're going to wreck before we get to the white flag and cause another overtime, or we're going to wreck on the last lap. It was very formulaic in the way it went. And you could put anybody in that 4th row on the outside and they're going to win that race. William Byron was just the lucky one to be in that position. And I'll give credit where credit is due. William Byron was one of only 4 drivers that entered this weekend that did not have an incident. Only one of 2 if we're taking away some of the issues that Haley and Priest had in the practice sessions with the gearboxes and all of that. One of only 2. The other was BJ McLeod. William Byron did deserve to win this race, and him growing his legacy is something that I would love to talk about because he's pretty much secured his spot on the NASCAR 100 list that will be coming out 23 years from now. I think he has now locked himself into that conversation, and by now being a 2-time Daytona 500 winner, and major props to that team and for going back to back. But at the same time, we gotta take a realistic look of this and say, he really didn't win this. He survived it. Tyler Reddick didn't finish 2nd. He survived it. Jimmy Johnson finished 3rd because he survived it. Jimmy Johnson was 15th, 14th coming to the backstretch?
I don't know, somewhere back there.
I think wanted to avoid it.
Or something, and then they all started wrecking in front of him. He saw a hole and went through there.
Yeah. And this race is about survival now. And I don't know what it is. I'll give credit where credit is due, right? Because I thought immediately after the rain happened at lap 10, right? Because we have seen this time and time again. This is not a new phenomenon. When you have drivers cooped up for about 3 to 4 hours, they tend to get a little antsy, and we usually have a caution immediately following in a giant red flag against it. We didn't have that this week. So credit where credit is due on that front. But I almost feel like when you start compressing down the race, the IQ points seem to drop up with it towards the end of the race, because we're now in the mode of fuel saving for the first 180 laps of the race. If they don't throw a phantom degree caution, we're saving for 180 laps, and it's a bunch of screaming eagles in the final 20 trying to fight for whatever fish is on the surface.
Yeah, we'll elaborate on that more because there's definitely more to talk about with that. But I want to get to a couple of the incidents that did happen that led up to the ending of this race. One of them you mentioned was We expect a wreck where guys make some dumb decisions, and it's the usual suspects. You have these two together in the outside line, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. and Joey Logano.
I'm sorry. We're not talking about the 01 here. We're talking about the 47 and the 22, right?
I mean, you could throw Corey LaJoie in there if you want to, but he's not self-spinning and flipping, doing blowovers down the backstretch this time.
No, for once, Corey LaJoie actually had a very good race. He was very, very good.
But anyway, Joey Logano tries to go through the middle underneath Ricky Stenhouse. Stenhouse kind of throws a late block, but that stacks everybody up. And then Logano tries to squeeze himself into a hole where there isn't really one. Stenhouse is unwilling to give it up. These two get into a measuring contest. One thing leads to another and crash. Stenhouse gets turned into Ryan Blaney. Logano gets turned up. Kyle Busch, who after 20 years of trying still is not a Daytona 500 winner, gets turned off to the inside, has to get towed back. And unfortunately, there's confusion over whether or not NASCAR knows their own rules because Kyle Busch was unable to continue. And he went on a very long, I won't say long, but intense Twitter rant after the race. Old Rowdy is back, evidently. But Logano comes up, collects Noah Gragson, Chase Elliott involved, Cole Custer gets a piece, but he's able to keep going, and he would go on his reign of terror later. But yeah, they crashed. Logano's out of it. Kyle Busch is out of it. Ryan Blaney pretty much out of contention, although he would rebound to somehow get a top 10 out of it. But yeah, Stenhouse and Logano get together to start the first big wreck. Now, that wouldn't be the last one, if you can believe it. There was another wreck that happened after this involving Ryan Preece again. And this happens down the backstretch at Daytona. Trying to pull it up here. So this happened with 5 to go. That other incident Justin recalls that we've come to expect, really. Christopher Bell leading the outside line. Cole Custer behind him. Custer shoves him out of line, sends Bell into the outside wall into turn 3. Bell comes back down and then gets Preece, collects Ryan Preece, who proceeds to do a wheelie and then just blows the car right over, flipping upside down into turn 3, comes back on all fours, thankfully. But for the second time in a year and a half, Ryan Preece has wound up facing the wrong direction, going upside down at Daytona. And this crash was really strange. I mean, granted, I've been watching racing a long time. This reminded me of one of those wrecks you'd see in Open Wheel, where that car gets up in the air, front nose high, and the air gets underneath it and just pulls the car right over. I mean, Noah Sweet, the graphic artist involved in racing, he compared it to a drag boat crash. Like if you're at a drag boat race and they go out on the water and they're going really, really fast. One of them gets front side, very light on the front. It's almost like a sail on a sailboat, or if you have your hand, if you're driving along the road and you got your hand out the window and like you move it up like this, the air goes up over it and sometimes under it, but you can still keep it pretty straight. Whereas if you flip it like this, the air catches on the solid part and just goes whack. That's pretty much what it did with Ryan Preece's car there.
That one was a scary one. I think all of us saw his car. When it does the wheelie, of course, you're going to have the wow factor of, I've never seen it do that. And if I have, it wasn't in this kind of car. Once it got up in the air is when it got really scary, though. You thought, first of all, when the back hit the wall after that, you always have that thought with this car and the back end hitting the wall like that. You wondered if that was going to hurt. Of course, it hurt because that's a big impact, but luckily Ryan Preece got the window net down and got out and gave an interview, and it was a pretty poignant interview outside the infield care center. where he said, "I've walked away from two of these, and he's thought of his daughter while he was going through the air, and he's afraid that one day someone's not going to be coming out of one of these crashes. And if you go through two of these in a year and a half at this same track, you're right to have that fear, and it's valid to have that." Um, I think we've hit the point where we talked about the flat underbody more than a few times, and this one really, you can't deny that when you looked at this one because you watched it take off like a plane. And that was what I thought when it was on its wheels going up in the air was that looks like a plane taking off, and I don't want my cars looking like that. Um, I we have too many of these crashes at these high speed tracks, and they need to do something to get that to not happen. Now, every one of these, I want to say, well, that's a weird, unique incident that caused that to happen. Cars don't do wheelies at every track. Cars don't do wheelies at Daytona at all. But that's not the point. There are too many unique situations where the car can blow over. And I think we really got to emphasize some sort of fix that will minimize that chance because it's not about eliminating it. I don't know if eliminating is possible. We got to minimize the chances because this happens too often.
It does. And I think that is a thing where it's now not just this incident, it's been Corey LaJoie's incident. It's been Ryan Preece's incident. We take out the grass and it turns it into a parking lot back there. And that didn't do anything. It's the body of the car. It is these things turn into Boeings when they catch a little bit of air at this point.
I'm pointing to where I feel is the problem.
Yeah.
That solid underbody.
Yeah. I don't think there's much to deny it at this point. I'm not really any astrophysicist or engineer. I don't work for a Boeing. I don't work for another plane company. I don't work for Lockheed Martin. But even I could tell you when flat at surfaces catch air, they like to go upwards. They like to fly. And in this situation, Priest caught more than enough air to have that thing blow over. And it was a wild ride. And luckily, he was okay. And thankfully, he's okay. And I'm lucky for the fact that car, there were not more cars behind him because it wouldn't have been the catch fence catching him. It would have been another car catching him in a similar way that Ryan Newman was caught and going up the banking. Luckily, this happened more towards the back than it did the front because if it happened more towards the front, there's another car hitting him, driver's side door. And I know for a fact Ryan Preece will not be walking away in that incident. Luckily, in this incident, that didn't happen. The roll cage remained intact. I do have concerns about that back shot because, geez, that it looks just awful for the spine in particular. But the cars did its job again in terms of the safety. The Newman bar or the roll cage, everything did its job. But if there's a car that hits him again, we're looking at a similar situation to Ryan Newman. Now, I do not want to have tested the fate of a roll cage getting hit from the driver's or from the top by a car going 190 miles an hour, Hal.
And that's we had all those changes after 2020 because of that crash to the super speedways and the cars itself. And let's put it this way. The quality of racing, I wouldn't say it was really hurt, but it wasn't helped. And the prevention of this car doing that isn't happening. There is no prevention. It's still happening. I think the Newman bar, great change. Everything else, it's not stopping the cars from doing that. It's not going to be like you could get lucky right here. This is getting lucky that no car was coming up at full speed, that he turned down to the apron and that's where the flip happened. These are lucky parts because that gave everybody else the opportunity to slow down and not run into him. but you can't count on luck at Daytona forever. At some point, you got to make the actual changes necessary to the underbody of that car that will not make it take off like that. And they always do come back up right up onto the track. Again, these are the parts that you have to look at. If you're Ryan Preece to say, I got lucky, I've been lucky twice because flipping in the grass is also lucky. It's a good place to be because no one is coming at full speed down into the grass while you're flipping. But going back onto the track and then flipping, and it could have been a lot worse. We shouldn't be waiting for it to get a lot worse.
No, and this is where we got to start calling out NASCAR. We got to be more proactive about this. NASCAR has been proactive since Dale Earnhardt, but it feels like we are resting on the morals of Austin Dillon's crash all the way back in 2015 and Ryan Newman's crash not being worse than what it already was. We've tested this car far too much to be having these incidents keep happening and nothing changes. That car did not even go back to the R&D center this week.
It should have, because Mike Joy pointed out on the broadcast, those roof flaps did not activate until after he's already landed.
Well, they did not.
I mean, like if the roof flaps, here's the thing, they're not in a position to activate here.
Yeah.
They're not facing the wind. They're not facing the car's velocity and how it's angled toward the wind, or not even toward the wind, but in the direction it's going with how it's angled. They don't have a chance to deploy. This car is already airborne. And to me, this was the most terrifying. Like if I'm Ryan Preece, this is the most terrifying part because the front of the car is up in the air. You're looking at the sky. You don't know where you're going. For all he knows, he could be a few feet from the catch fence and about to rip the front end of the car off.
You have no idea because you're looking upward, or you're not looking upward at Daytona all that often. But this is one of those incidents where you have to, you got lucky. That's the bottom line of it. He got lucky that this was as far back in the pack as it was, that more cars did not hit him, because that thing could have easily turned into a tabletop. He could have been ping-ponged around even more. We're getting to the point with these races where if we're not doing it on the back stretch, we're going to do it on the front stretch. And there's part of me that keeps going in the back of my mind. One of these days, if we continue to go down this path, we're getting another car in the catch fence. We're going to get another one of these cars in the catch fence coming to the checkered flag at the Daytona 500. We might get one in the regular season finale at Daytona. We've tempted this fate time and time again. We are lucky that it has been, and fortunate that it has been nearly 25 years since the last driver passed away.
That's the reality that we're in, is that we're lucky. We got lucky a bunch of times when it comes to cars actually going in the catch fence and people being able to end up walking away from it and live on, because we had Carl Edwards going to the fence at Talladega. That was scary. That was terrifying when you saw it rip apart the fence. We saw Austin Dillon at Daytona and
Kyle Larson.
We're going, the way these cars move like that, we're going to get there again. I don't like the speaking absolutes about something like that, but unless something's done, we're going to get there again, because there is going to be an incident down the front stretch for the win, I bet you, and they're going to go flying because that's what these cars are unfortunately aerodynamically inclined to do. So until that's changed, we're going towards a future where it's going to happen again, and luckily, catch fences have been very, very good at what they do, but we shouldn't be testing them. We shouldn't be. I don't want to test them again. I really don't, but they got to change it.
The way I see it, you can only tempt fate for so long before the worst outcome is reached. And the thing is, NASCAR, I'll give them props for the safety precautions, the measures that they've implemented, the way that these cars, because these cars are still incredibly safe. And they deserve credit for that, for making the cars as safe as they've been for the last several years, ever since not even Dale Earnhardt, but Blaze Alexander in October of 01. For making these cars as safe as they've been, where we have been fortunate that we haven't had a fatality in any of the NASCAR top levels for upwards of 20 years. But it is still an ever evolving sport. It is an ever evolving thing. These cars, these drivers, they're getting more competitive. They're getting more, for lack of a better term, ballsy. They're not afraid to take risks out there. And I mean, you can only rely on the car's safety for so long before something really catastrophic happens. And you cannot be complacent in an area like driver safety. And the cars, say what you will about the cars, but again, you can only tempt fate for so long, and you cannot be complacent.
You can't. And that's the bottom line with safety, period. And this goes for all motorsports as well. It shouldn't take a driver getting severely hurt or getting killed for innovation to come. And again, if this car was going back to R&D, if this was taking the trip about 400 meters from where RFK's facility is, if this is going to 400 meters away from RFK's facility right now, it's a different conversation, I think, because we would at least know NASCAR would be taking actions. However, that car is going 400 meters separately. That is back at RFK's shop. NASCAR could make that trek down if they wanted to. They could cross the street and say, hey, we'd like to look at that car. Or I'm sure RFK would allow them to. But that's not the case. Again, what happens if Michael McDowell, we had Michael McDowell in the fence 6 months ago, coming up across the field? Oh, nearly a similar accident to what happened in 2012. I don't want to tempt the fate of the I don't want to tempt the fate of anything near that driver's head. That means the window net. That means the opposite side. And that means the roof of the car. I don't want to tempt fate with that. I don't want to tempt fate at 190 miles an hour. I still have nightmares about that Newman crash. I still have physical nightmares about that Newman crash. And for the second time now in the last, as this decade, we're talking about driver safety as a major concern. We didn't have this concern when Harrison Burton went airborne when we were down at the 500. We thought, oh, that's just, car going outside, it getting airborne. That's normal how it reacts. That happened in the Gen 6. That happened in the Gen 5. This is something where I don't think that happens in a Gen 6. I don't think that happens in a Gen 5. It does the wheelie, but that thing comes down. And that may or may not be more dangerous on the spine in those cars. But at least I know it comes down on its wheels and not ragdolling across turn 3 in the backstretch, Hal.
That's where I get concerned thinking about if it slams back down on its wheels, because that is a spine problem. And that is also a big concern because, as we know, back injuries, you spend a lot of time recovering from. You're not the same for a year and a half, maybe. And that's if it's just a back injury and not something worse, because that kind of impact can break some bones. And I don't want to see that either. I can't prevent what happened initially with that wreck. I don't think you can. It was a freak incident where really Ryan Preece got nowhere to go, and his car does the wheelie like we said. You don't see stock cars do wheelies often. I can't remember the last time I saw a stock car do a wheelie like that. So in that instance, I can't fault NASCAR for looking at this exact situation and going, I don't think we've prepared for that, because you do not prepare for the cars doing wheelies. I can't fault anybody for that. What it does after that is where I start to fault it. Like Sterling said, the roof flaps had no chance to actually deploy. And
Correct.
that's because with the design of this car, and I think most stock cars, they again do not account for being at that angle at any point. And I don't think it would have helped either, because it would have probably helped it take off, if anything. Um, it's this particular crash, and we said the same thing, I think, Corey LaJoy at Michigan, where it was kind of like, it's unique because of this kind of track and the kind of speeds they go at and all that, but it's not unique because there's a lot of tracks that go at this kind of speed. And Atlanta goes at this speed now, and all these other tracks, the intermediates, they go very quick, and this could happen at any of them.
Yeah.
That's our problem that we sit with right now, is this can happen at more than just your super speedways, which used to be the only places you'd think we can see that happen.
Yeah. And the thing is, one of the first things that I feel like a lot of fans who, like, if you were to ask somebody, what change do you make to prevent these cars from getting up in the air, from getting upside down? The first thing they'll say is, or one of the first things they'll say is, well, slow the cars down. I don't even think that's going to do anything, because we have slowed the cars down. The cars are going slower than they've been, and they're still flipping.
If you were to ask me, if you were to ask some people, take off the restrictor plates, I don't want to try that at Daytona. Did you see the amount of cars that were catching air in the?
I'm not sure. When was the last time they actually raced it, had restrictor plates on these cars? Because I don't know that they do anymore.
They got the spacers now, don't they? Tapered spacers.
I think that's.
It's still a plate track.
Yeah.
These are still plate tracks, and if it's a tapered spacer or restrictor plate, either way, you don't take that out. Can't take that out because these cars are flying off 3 and 4. Or we saw that in the truck and ARCA races.
This was happening with or without restrictor plates or tapered spacers. It happens with or without them, one or the other. And you don't want to do it where you don't have either. We've seen what that can do, and that is not something we want to go back to. Even if we love speed, we don't like it that much that we sacrifice safety for it anymore.
But the thing is, what's causing these incidents? It is these guys, bumper to bumper, 3, 4 wide, can't get separated.
Look at this one in particular. It was caused by really aggressive bumping. Cole Custer was doing a great job at bump drafting for a while, and then suddenly they're pointing it out, and you could watch Christopher Bell. He was having a horrible time handling that thing until he got put in the wall. It really is, for all of the things we say NASCAR is responsible for, it is these guys on the track. Suddenly, in those last 20 laps, they forget how to race, and they cause disaster out there because they make moves they shouldn't make. Both of those incidents in the last 15 laps, you could point at somebody on the track, more than one guy too. Joey Logano shouldn't have shot the gap on that in that particular incident, but Ricky Stenhouse Jr. doesn't have to come back and block him like that either. Two guys put everybody else at risk on the track and ended a lot of days and cost hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars in damage for cars that couldn't go back out there and other ones whose days were ruined. And we had 15 laps, 5 laps, these moves are being made. If it's the last lap, I get it. This wasn't the last lap. Guys were doing things way too soon, and even if you do it on the last lap, we still look at you and have to ask, what are you actually thinking you can do in that situation that's going to help you win the race? Because it looks like you're just pushing guys out of the way.
And also, there's more emphasis placed now on winning than there has been more emphasis has been placed on winning over the last 10 years now than there was at any time before 2014. Because now, if you're a full-time driver and you win, you got a shot at a championship. And, at the end of the day, drivers want that championship, and they will do risky things. They'll drive, frankly, in over their heads to try and make things happen. It's not sustainable. And, that I guess can segue into other comments about this type of racing, how now, back when even back when I first started watching around 2006, 2007, you had the super speedway races. Yes, there was some bit of luck that accounted for how drivers were finishing, but at the same time, there was some skill involved in there. You needed to have a good car. You needed to have some good speed to lead at the front. The setup mattered, skill mattered, handling on these cars, handling mattered. And yes, you still had cars that were packed together, but they weren't as tight. It wasn't as dense. You had cars that you had multiple packs that were forming. You had a pack that was pretty evenly spread between maybe 10 or 12 cars here. And then give it another 2 or 3 seconds, and you've got another pack that had formed with about between 10 to 15 cars. Some were single file, some would form another line next to it, but they'd be spread out around the track. Now, what we have here is what we saw for most of yesterday, and Riley Herbst hinted to this when Jeff Gluck asked about the race. Herbst, a rookie, said that the Daytona 500 at this rate should just be 65 laps because everybody rides around for the first 2/3 of the race, just going half speed, really. I mean, half throttle, 100 something miles an hour. The average green flag speed when clocked in was around 129 miles an hour. That's not good. And you have drivers going half throttle because they know if they go full throttle, they're going to burn more fuel. And by how the stage cautions are set up at the laps they're set up at, more throttle time, if they're full throttle all the time, they're going to burn more fuel, and that's going to throw off their strategy. And you've got the stage cautions also factoring in as to when they pit, and you want to pit together. You want to pit with your manufacturers. Otherwise, you're going to be left out to dry. You have the fuel factor in there, trying to save fuel. You have other factors of trying to, I had a thought and then I lost it, but you have guys that are like packs that are 3 wide, about 10 rows deep, which it looks cool on TV, but most of the guys, they don't want to be out front because they know they would have to use more throttle if they're out front. And if you use more throttle, you're going to burn more fuel. But at the same time, you're in the middle, you're at the back, you don't want to move anywhere. And based on how these cars are, they're so low to the ground, there's so much drag that Denny Hamlin, he pointed it out on Action Sentimental, you can't really go anywhere. You're just kind of stuck there. Joey Logano, Ryan Blaney, Austin Cindric, they were able to work their way up through the field, but they had some really good cars. Like Cindric, Blaney, and Logano combined, they combined to lead over half the race. But if you're not them, you've got a car that can't really go anywhere. You're stuck where you're at. You're at the mercy of other cars around you trying to draft with you or push your way up to the front, and then you get pushed out of line. If you get stuck in the middle or somewhere else, if you get in a place where there's no drafting help behind you, goodbye. You're heading to the back. No one's going to save you.
It's like anytime someone tried to make their own line up the top without anybody behind them, they just dropped to the back like they had a parachute on the back of the car. That has been the trend for a while. It's why we had the weird little phase where everybody just ran in a single train line and we all had to be sick to our stomachs for that. Feels like the last 8 years, the 500 has brought out some of the worst strategies for entertainment in Daytona 500 history, and it's not really getting much better. I will say this one, you at least had 3 lines for most of the race, and the third line was always struggling at the top to try to get any momentum, but it felt like there was at least an attempt to not have this race be just one train. That attempt, eh, it felt like they were still going through the motions for the first two stages. That's the problem watching the Daytona 500 lately is you are actually just watching some guys go through the motions, trying not to wreck more than anything. They don't really care about their position, and that's fine because you don't have to care till the last lap of a stage anyway. Why would you try to race for the rest of the stage? But they're going through the motions, and you don't feel like there's any actual, how do I put this, racing happening. There's no position taking that matters. And sure, we get to the end of the stage, and guys get 10 points if they win the stage. And if you are anyone who's viewing the Daytona 500 like, most people are for the Daytona 500, the casual viewer, you do not care about those 10 points. You do not care about these stages. You are sitting there going, okay, but who's going to win? And that is the big problem, as we said earlier, is that really the focus has been on guys who win. As much as I've been kind of casting some blame on Cole Custer for the Christopher Bell Ryan Preece flip, Cole Custer doesn't have many chances to win. So of course Cole Custer of all guys is going to be going at the Daytona 500 acting like it's his only chance to win because it might be. It might be his only shot. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is a specialist on this track, and I hate to say it, but these tracks alone, he is going to treat this like his biggest race of the year, and if you're in front of him, he's probably going to treat you like an obstacle more than a guy to partner up with. That is the problem with the system we have, and we've gone at length about the system we have and how much of a problem it is, but it really reveals itself at the plate tracks, at the super speedways, where guys get reckless, get desperate, and then cause massive incidents because they feel like they have to. They feel like they need to do that, and a lot of times, sometimes we gotta say it, a lot of times they don't have the talent to do what they want to do out there. And that compensates in guys getting put into the wall. The quality of racing at Daytona, as I said to start, the standard is the standard, is how I felt about this race. We had three lines, and I like seeing three lines, three wide throughout the pack. That's cool to see. I didn't feel like it was your usual three wide, though. When I think of three wide, I think, oh, dear Lord Jesus, somebody help these guys get through it. But really, it turned into 130 laps of guys going three wide and nothing happening. And that's okay for nothing to happen as long as they're passing and there's some reason for them to be going for the lead when they do. Joey Logano had the best car, is what I think. He had the best car out there. He was the fastest car, and his mistake cost him because he could have won that race. He could have easily been able to give it a shot to win that race, and that move cost him big time. He at least had the foresight to try to back out of it. But Ricky Stenhouse Jr. didn't think he was going to back out of it. He thought he had to jump down, block him, and ended up forcing him into Kyle Busch. That mindset that turns off in the last 15 laps is something that should be studied by psychologists worldwide to figure out what happens in a driver's mind because it's like a switch flips and it hurts the quality of racing. I know people love to see the big one because, wow, lots of cars wrecking. It's entertaining. It's as a WWE fan, when I first started watching, I sure did like that stuff. But now I'm kind of sitting there going, that's a lot of money wasted. That's a lot of days ruined by someone's silly mistake. And it's not entertaining is the scary part for me. I'm not entertained by all these cars wrecking. It is just another big one. You want to talk about a big one that really, if you look back, you sit there and go, that had everything that was awe-inspiring? Tony Stewart going through the air in 01. That was a big one where you came back from commercial and sat there and went, what in the world happened? You don't do that anymore. You're not that surprised when you come back from commercial and everybody's wrecked. You just go, okay, who did it? That's a real problem to have when you are literally sitting there with 3 or 4 guys in the field and you're taking guesses. Who caused it?
I mean, you think back to 2012 with the Mega at Talladega when Tony Stewart made the aggressive block on Mark Martin. You weren't going, wow, that was really stupid by Tony Stewart going for the win there. It was like, holy cow, that is a big wreck. Like, that just happened. What the heck? Like, that's awesome if you're not any one of the guys involved in that wreck, like, or your fan base. With it being in this race, and by the way, how you mentioned WWE, apparently William Byron brought AJ Styles in with an identical car. I am not sure how they pulled this off. I don't know where Raw is tonight, but that's besides the point. When you go to these races, you are expecting the big one. You are expecting the chaos and the drama in the last 10 laps, but you're also expecting now fuel saving for the first there's 3 stages of the race, and then when the final pit stop happens, it is, well, boys, we've done our final pit stop. You guys can now actually go out there and race. And it's almost like a switch goes off in everybody's heads where it's like, finally, I get to race. I get to put it in my hand. I don't have to go half throttle around here. I get to go and actually try to make some moves, because this is a race about survival. It is a race where you are trying to just get to the end of the race. Guys are making stupid moves all throughout the course of the event, but they're doing it in a way where they're not going to take each other out. If they make a stupid move early on, it's them alone who's going to suffer the consequences, and they go straight to the back as a part of that punishment. At the end of the race, everybody's making a stupid move. Hamlin's making a stupid move. Cindric's making a stupid move. Briscoe's making a stupid move. And by the time we get to about 10 to go, you're just holding your breath at that point, because you know it's coming. There's nothing you could do to stop it. We should be giving more praise when it doesn't happen now than we do give credit to, or give attention to when it does happen. It is the madhouse whenever we get down to 10 laps to go, and it's a race about survival, and then we'll line them up and do it again. We'll have it at 5 laps to go. We'll line them up and do it for an OT, and it's either the white or the checker, depending on which lap you want to take. Your call. You know what the end result's going to be. I'm shocked at the fact that this one ended on the green. I thought for sure it was going to be over after Herbst got spun out, because it's like, right, that's at the front stretch. He's not going to be able to hold on to it. Somehow miraculously does hold on to that. So major props to him. And then on the backstretch, you're thinking, oh, well, this is over. Or Byron and Reddick are going to finish 1-2 here. And they let it go green. But the point is, the wreck still happened on the backstretch. Custer came down and did a dumb move. You got to get to the front stretch in order to make that happen. I don't care what run you have or don't have at that moment. On that final lap, you have to decide who your friends and who your enemies are going to be. And you at least have to make it to have a chance at it. Because I think a lot of the frustration for a lot of guys is, I didn't even have a shot at it. We wrecked on the backstretch. At least on the front stretch, we're going for the win. On the backstretch, we still got 1.25 miles to go.
Yeah. I mean, even Denny in his interview with Fox after the race mentioned, I mean, I would have rather we wait till we're coming out of turn 4 before we started, really trying to crowd each other down or whatnot. Because then, hey, at least the checkered's in sight. We're going for it.
Right. I mean, for some guys, I get that doesn't work from like 7th on back. Like if you're making a move, if you're really not, I mean, if you're 7th on back at the end of the 500, your only chance is really waiting for a wreck in front, and they have a shot at winning. You're not going to win it from 7th on the backstretch unless they wreck in front of you, in which case Byron got the victory because of that.
Exactly.
But Byron wasn't winning. If that went to the front stretch, Byron wasn't winning in the race by his own volition. And Cody Ware was not winning the race by his own volition. Cody Ware was not winning the race by his own volition. It would have been others wrecking each other to allow that hole for a guy to sneak through and get the win. Yeah. On the backstretch, that's not happening. And I don't get why these are happening, but you almost expect now we're going to have a 10-5, a OT, maybe 2, and we're going to wreck on the checker flag just for good measure. And we're going to tear up a bunch of race cars. And quite frankly, I don't think we've torn up enough race cars. If that's what we want, if that's what the casuals want, I don't think we've torn it up enough.
Okay, Tony Stewart, let's settle down for a second.
But does that draw 2 million more people to the race than it does as for every other race, like another Talladega or Atlanta? Yes, it does. This race draws more. Now, granted, we'll have to see what the ratings are. We did have SNL's 50th anniversary. We did have the NBA All-Star game, which, let's be honest, this 500 may have been kind of a joke, but that one was an even bigger one.
How do I put this? Let's just say the NHL's Four Nations Cup has been a revelation.
You're darn right it has. I could go on forever about that one and not say mean things about it, but this race, as you said, we're talking about, is it going to bring in more eyes? And all I can think about is that about 21 years ago, we had a 500 end in under 120 laps of green flag that Dale Earnhardt Jr. won. And I don't think any of the fans watching back then will look back and say it needed more cautions. They're probably very happy with just who won. I think sometimes it really does depend who wins, and everyone will change their opinions on. Chase Elliott wins this race. Everyone talks about it was entertaining the whole way through. It's 3 wide the whole race. How can you complain?
I'm glad you brought that up, because I feel like if this was like a Chase Elliott, or even just going back to Friday night, a Parker Kligerman type, then people would probably look back on this race a little more fondly.
Okay, but I'll throw the monkey's paw curl at you. John Hunter Nemechek, Cody Ware, Ty Dillon.
Then you'd have a lot of people.
You'd have more
hold
angry
on
people than we got right now.
Yeah.
We had, as a winner, we had Switzerland Incarnate win this race. There's not really opinions for or against William Byron. I mean, have a level playing field to assess our opinions on this.
The thing, and that was the other. I mean, I understand the flip side of it too. That's the thing with William Byron. He's a deserving driver, very talented. No one's arguing that. But he's also, and I don't mean to bag on William Byron, because he put himself in position to win the race, but God, he is so boring. He is so bland. Matt Kenseth is more entertaining than William Byron.
Yeah, because Matt Kenseth took out Joey Logano and fought Brad Keselowski in the haulers.
I was going to say, to be fair to Matt Kenseth, those latter years, he really showed some more personality. William Byron, like you said, he's the most inoffensive driver out there. He's probably done nothing to ever make you mad. He's done nothing to make you really go, yeah, that's my guy. That's the point of putting in the Chase Elliott caveat. Is you said Switzerland. Chase Elliott's everybody's favorite driver, and if he wins, it does affect how people look at things. Because I think William Byron brings out the most honest opinions about this race. I think he brings out that, are we really upset with the quality of this particular race? No, I don't think I am. I'm looking back at other races and now looking at this one going, this is a symptom of a long-term problem. And this race in a vacuum, say even after one of our, let's say, single lane train 500s, we'd probably look at this as a pretty good evolution of it. This was much more entertaining in terms of we had passing throughout the entire thing. There was no everyone waits in a line. The line kept moving, and some guys kept trying to make something happen on the third lane, and it just didn't work. That's more of a it's the mentality was better. Let's put it that way. Guys were willing to do things to make things happen. But the way it ends is the typical way it ends. And I tried to look back from Daytona 500 since 2000. No, this is just how it's always been. This is unfortunately the reality is it's not new for Daytona. I think we just finally hit a point where fatigue is setting in with this same thing every year.
Exactly.
And that's the part for William Byron, is that him winning 2 years in a row is very impressive, but it also is fatiguing. People don't like to see the same guy win 2 years in a row. It doesn't happen often, but the fact that we're here and William Byron has won for the second straight year, I think that's probably caused a little bit more of people to speak their piece about their issues with the 500.
Well, let me ask this question and as well, because let's be honest, super speedways are the dessert of NASCAR. They're unhealthy. They're,
Yep.
good at entertainment, and they definitely add a few pounds,
Yeah.
but they're good. The fact now we have two more Atlanta races, right? And we have the fact that this has as big of implications on the playoffs as it does, right? We are adding whipped cream to everything we eat because of that win in you're in. We'll add whipped cream to a steak. We'll add whipped cream to a salad.
Ew.
We'll add whipped cream to spaghetti.
Oh, no.
Oh, what's wrong with you, man?
But you get my point.
Yeah.
You get my point with this. We're having this hot fudge sundae every single time, like every 6 races, we're having a hot fudge sundae. And we have the whipped cream with it as well.
Here's what makes this even less special, this race. Less special is, again, we went to overtime, and we're going to go to overtime about a dozen more times at least this year, and that's not how that's supposed to work. Overtime, in every other instance of a sport that has it, it happens maybe 15% of games. At most, I feel like. Maybe I'll look up some NHL stats to back that up, but this has to be the highest percentage a sport goes to overtime, and it makes it feel a lot less special. And I get it, we want to end under green and all that. And my advice would be send out a memo that says stop driving like idiots at the end of races and causing cautions that make us go to overtime.
But for 10 guys, this is their best shot at into the playoffs.
And that's the big problem right there. William Byron winning was one of the best case scenarios to come out of that caution. The other one for me was Reddick wouldn't have been bad either. If Jimmy Johnson had won, everyone would be smiling like Chase Elliott won, and it wouldn't affect playoff implications unless Jimmy decided he wanted to race the rest of the year, in which case, go ahead, Jimmy, I'm fine with it, but that's because we're biased towards old man Jimmy Johnson these days. If we're talking about a different Jimmy Johnson from a decade ago, we'd all be saying, no.
Exactly.
And no offense, Jimmy Johnson probably won the worst Airs 500 in this 25-year stretch. Let's not kid ourselves about 2013.
Okay, I was going to say 25
2006
year stretch.
was excellent.
Well, yeah, 2006 was great. But you said 25-year stretch, and then I thought, okay, 2000, I guess, is beyond that threshold.
Yeah.
Because 2013 was bad. I would argue 2000 was worse.
Again, hence why I said 25 years, because that is the entire Fox portion plus 3 NBC races in there.
Right.
But the point still stands. Yeah, Jimmy Johnson probably would have been a popular winner. And by the way, that is by far his best finish in any race he has entered since he has hung up the helmet.
It's his first top 5 since he was a full-time Cup driver.
Yes. It's a first top 10, I would say as well. Oh, dare I might add, but that's the point. Tyler Reddick wouldn't have been an issue. In fact, there was a part of me like staying up at like 11:50 at night thinking, did Byron fail tech? Because this is now taking over 3.5 hours, and they don't want to have Tyler Reddick win this race. Luckily, Byron did pass tech, all good. He cleared it. There are a couple cars going back to R&D, but again, we get a good perspective with Byron. And, I don't think Byron should be getting the blunt force of our blame here. Like Logano was with the title. This was, Byron played the system to perfection. We're not hating on Byron winning this race at all. Again, there is neither a strong feeling for or against other than playoff implications and him getting off to a hot start again.
Let's get it straight about William Byron is he was in the right place at the right time. And we've said it before, that can be a skill in itself. And it was this time. Now, I would also say that if Austin Cindric had somehow made it through there, I would say the same thing for him. Because right place, right time, he just got someone turned in front of him. William Byron is as deserving of a guy to win the Daytona 500 as anybody. I don't think there's anybody in the field that you're looking at saying, well, they deserved it more. You had people who wanted Kyle Busch to win, and I was in a call with one of them. They were very upset at that wreck that took him out, and I can't blame them. William Byron, though, when he wins, I listen to the reaction of a guy who watches NASCAR from week to week, and that reaction was, cool, the 24 one. No one's mad that William Byron won this race, and that's a good thing to see because we've had some races at Daytona. Let's go back to fall last year when Harrison Burton won, where people were just angry because a quote undeserving driver was going to make the playoffs. William Byron saved everybody from that discussion today. We could have had it happen, but that's one of the realities of it. I remember looking late in the race, I saw Jimmy Johnson was in 26th. That didn't matter because I also saw he was on the lead lap, and that's what actually matters. Daytona brings out that ability for anybody to win, which is a blessing and a curse. This time we were a little more blessed than we have been in the past.
At least in that regard, we were. But in terms of, I guess, circling back to the quality of racing, and Justin, and piggybacking off of your analogy of how these drafting tracks are the dessert that we have. Yes, they're sweet, typically, but you can't have too many of it, or else you're going to stuff yourselves full. You're going to get obese. Even with yesterday's race, it was hard to, especially at the end, to feel like it was dessert, like it was cake or candy, because what we've come to expect out of these, with the late crashes, everybody not really trying until 20 to go, and then they're finally full throttle, and then they're all just trying to get to the front and losing their minds in the process, and all the late crashes, and then the flips, and the things we've come to expect with the Daytona 500 late in the going. Matt Weaver of Sportsnaut wrote a really good article. One of the quotes that he put in there was that even at the end of this race, it didn't feel like it was candy that we were eating. This felt like a bag of salt and vinegar potato chips.
Well, and the other thing that I think it gets mixed into it, and I'll continue with the food analogy, we were eating this outside in the rain. We were eating this meal outside in the rain. Because let's face it, 5 of the last 6 years have had the 500 either have a lengthy delay or has been postponed to Monday. We have had that happen so many times with this race. So we're eating soggy desserts is what we've had for the last 5 years. And I don't care what food it is. Anything that's soggy is going to be not tasting as good as if it wasn't soggy. That's the thing with the 500 is it has been, and quite literally, watered down over the past couple of years because of the rain. It takes away some of that prestigiousness to it. Now, I'm not saying that's NASCAR's fault. Not blaming them at all for that. And they can't control the weather, although I do joke that NASCAR is the National Association secretly controlling all rain. And that's why you had POTUS there on Sunday. But regardless, the point is, you're right. It didn't feel like eating candy. When I am, talking about the NASCAR season, I am glad whenever we get to the 500. There is still that giddy excitement, and for me, even in my 20th year watching this sport, my first race was the 2006 Daytona 500. This is my 20th 500 I have watched. I still get that giddy feeling I did when I first flipped on the TV when I was 5 years old, watching this race. The thing is, though, unlike when I was 5 years old, I am glad that we are done with this race. And I almost look at next week and I see the cheesecake coming out from Atlanta. And I just think, oh man, not again. We got to do this another week. Like, okay, I want to give me some pasta. Give me some ribs. Give me something else. Oh, so almost. And granted, last year's Atlanta race was so good. Best cheesecake we've ever had. But still, it's like this race kind of makes you don't want the dessert again.
Somewhere there's a Roman Reigns quote I have for this that I can't say on air, but I'm going to put it. another way. I'm gonna keep the food analogy going because I'm hungry now, and I'm gonna compare it to something else because, in my opinion, since the next gen car came out, dessert has been going to Kansas, as far as I'm concerned. Maybe people don't look at it that way, but I see this more like a pizza that I've been waiting on for an hour from a pizza joint nearby, and it shows up and the cheese is barely melted, and you're looking at it kind of going, that's going to be stringy and probably a problem later on when I'm done eating this. It looks unappetizing.
It's
Why
pulling
didn't they cook it more?
it's
That's what it
pulling
feels like.
pizza.
Yes, I'm pulling pizza, and I want to compare it mostly because of the rain delay. It's when you're waiting on a pizza from somewhere and you get it and it's not what you really anticipated. You're expecting a higher quality for the wait, especially because we were sitting there for a long time. And I hate to bring this up, but Ryan Priest was on the rain delay presentation. And please stop showing him crashes when he's talking on the broadcast because at this point it's just mean. But we're sitting there waiting through this rain delay. We're watching all the drying equipment out on the track, and then they get back out there, and then they go 8 laps around, no, 9 laps in caution, and come back down because it's raining again. They're delaying it, and that's what they come back with at the end is not a bad race per se, but just feels uninspired. And that's where it hurts to watch is when you know you're going to be waiting 4 more hours to watch the race and that's what you get. I think that really hurts people's perceptions of the race because people were talking about it going, well, you look at the forecast, maybe we can even get a daytime winner like the old days. And yeah, no, what do you think this is? This is Daytona and we're going to get rain and you're going to wait till nighttime like usual. Be happy you're not waiting till Monday. That's the best thing I could say about this race is at least we didn't wait till Monday for that.
Yeah.
At least we're not watching it play out in front of us right now as we're recording this. No, we've got a winner to talk about and a race to talk about, but we don't have much. The negatives are the negatives, but they aren't that drastic, and the positives are just not very positive. This was a very mid 500 to be nice about it.
It's a B tier race, is what it was. It's not it's not a classic. It's not a great race. It's not, I mean, I almost think this race was almost similar to 2022. And we look at 2022, I think, in a positive light. Do we not? Because of the finish and because of them actually making it into the checkered flag. We did have kind of the similar recipe from 2022. It's just that we were overexposed to it. That hot fudge sundae is the same as the 2022, except for maybe the less sogginess of it.
Well, I think the way you could put it is that someday I eat it so often I don't like it anymore. That might be the big issue. You eat enough of something enough times in a row to it's overexposure to it. It's like if you eat that pizza every single week, twice a week even, yeah, you don't want pizza by next month. You want to eat anything else.
I think that's another problem we're getting at is that this type of racing at Daytona and also Talladega and to a lesser extent Atlanta, you know, we've come to have certain expectations of these races that when the races play itself out and they happen exactly as we expect, it's not special anymore.
No.
It loses its luster.
But I'll counter this by asking about the Indy 500 because we've had similar finishes the last couple of years with the Indy 500 where we've had, late race passing and all of that. The reason why the Indy 500 hasn't lost its luster yet is because there's still a feeling of, I guess, legitimacy to it.
Yes,
these guys are fuel saving in the Indy 500. Yes, these guys are, conserving their tires and saving, and they do get much more aggressive when the laps start ticking down. But there's just something more natural with it.
It's more organic.
It's organic, exactly. It's organic, and even if Indy 500 keeps producing year of the race every single year, we didn't include it last year because we kind of got to the point of where it maybe is becoming expected, and maybe that's not fair to the 500.
I put it in my race of the year.
It was a race of the year. It was just Kansas and Atlanta were that much better, in our opinion. It was still on par with 2023, 2022. Like, it was still on par with that. But the reason why I don't think we're complaining about that is because there's still a feeling of legitimacy to it. There's still a feeling that the best guy goes out there and wins the Indy 500. Joseph Newgarden was the best driver in 2024, correct?
Yes.
Joseph Newgarden was the best driver in 2023, correct?
You can make a case for Marcus Ericsson.
I can make a case for Ericsson, but at least was he top 5? Top 3? 2022.
Ericsson.
Yeah. 2021.
Castroneves.
And how many of those guys won?
All except Ericsson from 23.
And even then, second best guy won that day.
That's the thing with Daytona is it's a crapshoot. And that's the problem, is that you don't actually... You can name one or two guys that you see their car and you say it's the best car out there. And this year was the Penske's we looked at most of all as the top cars out there. But does that mean that they were all running at the front the entire time?
No.
No, one of them was probably dropped back. When Cindric wasn't the top guy, it was Logano. And when Logano crashed out, it was Cindric. There are never any Daytona 500s where I sit there going, this guy is the favorite right now. Because Joey Logano, he had the fastest car and he was leading a lot of the race, and I still sat there and went, well, that doesn't mean he's going to win. That doesn't mean he's even going to be in the running at the end. It's Daytona's the different beast. I would say that you're right. The Indy 500 maintains its prestige because it is a place for the best to showcase their skills on the most famous oval in the world. And they usually end up delivering unless disaster strikes. And disaster doesn't strike nearly as often at the Indy 500 compared to Daytona. But that's the difference between the fame of both tracks. Indy for the Indy 500 is known for that. Daytona is known for the chaos. And sometimes you just kind of wish it would be known for the best super speedway driver went out and just won a race.
Or the best drivers. And granted, I would say William Byron is in that class of top 5 drivers. But you look at the winners before him, McDowell, Stenhouse, weren't really your best drivers. And Hamlin brought up an excellent point on his podcast. It's actions detrimental. This is, you don't feel like you're making stars out of this race. Michael McDowell is not a star because he won the Daytona 500. Trevor Bayne is not a star because he won the Daytona 500. He has a job at Fox because of the 500, but it's not like he became a star overnight. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is not a star in NASCAR. If anything, Stenhouse trends for the wrong reasons, and so that's how people would associate him than they would with his Daytona 500 trophy that he's got in the back of his cupboard. Again, this race doesn't, and this is also a point brought up by the teardown, this race does not reward the best drivers in NASCAR. Morgan Truex Jr. has not won a Daytona 500. Rusty Wallace has not won a Daytona 500. Tony Stewart, who won every other race at Daytona, except for a 24-hour, never won the Daytona 500. Mark Martin never won a Daytona 500. And there are Hall of Famers. All of those guys are Hall of Famers. Brad Keselowski, Kyle Busch, they're probably never going to get a 500. These guys are names that you would expect to have their name on the 500, not guys like Stenhouse or McDowell. And it's a shame, but it's reality. And do I look at the 500 like I do crown jewel wise compared to the 600 or the Southern 500? No, if anything, I hate saying it, but I almost feel like I'm starting to value 600 and Southern 500 wins as well as Brickyards more than I am the 500. At least since 2007 is the hallmark, I would put, maybe 2016. I'm starting to feel like those crown jewels are starting to have more reflective of the skill and talent and with that prestige than I do place in the 500. Because the 500 is starting to turn into just another super speedway.
Just trying to go through the list here of Daytona 500 winners. Trying to pull up the list here because like Michael McDowell's a 500 winner, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is a 500 winner, Austin Dillon is a 500 winner. But again, Denny Hamlin made the good point that, you know, the race doesn't make stars like it used to.
No.
And even then, that's not to say the 500 has been that's not to say that the 500 used to always produce stars, because it didn't. I mean, there are some years looking through here, you know, once in a blue moon, you get this really outside shot of a winner who ended up winning the race. I mean, 1990 Derek Cope is a perfect example. But you look further down the list through the 90s, 1991, Ernie Irvan, one of the best drivers of his time, absolutely deserved it. 1992, the late Davey Allison, terrific super speedway racer. Dale Jarrett in 93. You had the Dale and Dale show with Ned calling his son home. And also Dale Jarrett, NASCAR Hall of Famer. Sterling Marlin, a two-time winner back-to-back in 94 and 95, one of the best super speedway racers of his time and ranked as one of the 75 greatest drivers in NASCAR history. Jarrett again in 96. Jeff Gordon, 1997. Dale Earnhardt, 20 years of trying, 20 years of frustration in 98. Gordon again in 99. And then you go further with Jarrett in 2000, for a third time winning. Michael Waltrip, 460 some races trying and finally getting it in 2001. He ended up becoming known as one of the best super speedway racers with one of the best teams at that time in DEI. Ward Burton, kind of random in 2002, but he was still a really good racer at that time. You could count on him to get an outside shot, and sure enough, he made it stick in 02. The list is there into the 2000s with Dale Jr., Jeff Gordon again, Jimmy Johnson, Kevin Harvick, Ryan Newman, Matt Kenseth, even Jamie McMurray in 2010. You know, 2010 was the breakout year for him that showed, hey, give him the right equipment and he can really bring it places. So it didn't feel so random like it does now. And, you know, nowadays with how, I don't mean to harp on this point too much, but I bring it up because I feel like there's some aspects to be related to it, because we've seen how sports betting has increased in a lot of places. If you're someone who is a serial sports bettor, like tries to do it professionally, why would you bet on this race? Why would you bet on the 500? Because it doesn't matter what stats, what looking back in history, looking at statistics, looking at the likelihood of drivers being in certain places at certain times, it doesn't matter. Once you get inside 20 laps to go, if you got a book of stats or something, take it and throw it in the fireplace in front of me, because that's how much it means in the last 20 laps. You just hope and pray that the drivers get through without crashing. And 90% of the time, it's not going to work.
I can predict who can be the leader at lap 50. I can predict who can be the leader at lap 100 with the 500. I feel like I could still do that, right? I feel like I could still predict like 10 guys who I think are going to be that nucleus and are going to be up towards the front. Blaney's going to be a guy. Logano's going to be a guy. Stenhouse is going to be a guy. Hey, pretty much all the Penske's, let's be honest. Bubba Wallace is going to be a guy. Hey, William Byron, Denny Hamlin. You know what the nucleus is going to be at lap 25, lap 50, 111, 170 even. But when you get down to the final 10 laps, it doesn't matter. It is, at that point, everything goes out the window. Everything does not make sense. It doesn't matter. It almost feels like the stages are more predictable than the actual race itself. Like, I could have predicted Joey Logano and Ryan Blaney were going to be up towards the front in the stages. That makes sense. They are excellent plate drivers. But if you were to ask me if they're going to be there at the end, I don't know. I have no clue. Why would you ever bet on this race? Is one of the dumbest things ever. Like, if anything, I feel like any bet on this race needs $100 or cash out, no matter what driver it is. And that's if you put $1 down.
Yeah, if you were betting on Daytona 500, it's because you're bored and the NBA All-Star Game didn't feel worth betting on. That's the only way you would be betting on us. And if you use stats to try to bet on NASCAR at the 500, I'm sorry, you're probably smart, but today you aren't. It is a dumb thing to do for the 500. Don't use that. Throw it out the window, spin a wheel. You got a better chance to get it right. That would be my advice to any professional sports bettors out there. Don't bet on it. And if you do, don't use your brain. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. You can decide this guy maybe, oh, this guy's a good plate driver, all this. You give yourself a fighting chance, but you're probably still going to get disappointed. In a way, that's what people love about the 500, though, is you don't have a prediction who's actually going to probably win. You don't actually know. That is kind of the appeal of the Daytona 500. Is that, yeah, anybody could win at any point, really. As we looked at that list, you could tell there are just some years in a row where, yes, that driver's team is the best 500 team, but no, that is not who you expect to go win. Could you imagine, let me put it this way, when Michael Waltrip wins, if there were playoffs, what would the reaction be that Michael Waltrip, after all these years, just made the playoffs off the 500 win automatically? No, the rest of the season doesn't matter for him. It wouldn't be looked back as fondly. What was cool is that, no, it did not affect everything going forward after that with the championship, unless he had had a great year. In that case, we all shut up. The fact is that Waltrip would have had a chance to win a championship in playoff rounds and not have had to do anything for the other 25 races, and we would all be a little more upset about that win. Ward Burton, we would be saying, he only won because Sterling Marlin got out of his car. And now he's locked into playoffs.
Okay, Waltrip second, yes. The first one, and let's be honest, there would have been some other things going on during that time.
When we talk about the playoffs, I'm talking playoff dependent is what makes these a little more annoying to think about when we think about a Cody Ware winning. If there is no playoffs and a Cody Ware won, we would look at it as a great story. He's not going to win the championship, but it's a great story. But when we add playoffs to it, it muddies the waters and makes everyone not so happy to see an unexpected winner anymore.
Well, almost with a guy like anybody like 30th on back, we're at that point, we're just praying for, we're praying for more than 16 winners at that point, which means we would have to pray for another wild card winner to happen at Atlanta, at Talladega, or back at Daytona. That's just the reality of the situation. And I think we're circling around it. You mentioned playoffs. Nobody's brought this up all weekend, and I have to bring it up. Guess what, boys? We're going to spin that slot machine, and we're going to take that wheel on a ride, and we're going to keep rounding and rounding this little wheel. And guess what? That's how we're going to decide a round of 8 this year. That's how we're going to decide the penultimate round
That's awesome.
of your NASCAR playoffs in the year of our Lord and Savior 2025. And you will have one driver getting a lucky opportunity to get a win at Talladega that could screw or not screw over 8 playoff drivers at that point.
Here's the thing, though, that I mean, I know, that Talladega race, that's not that's not going to decide a round of 8. That is in the round of 8. It's going to determine a championship 4.
Well, good news is that there's a high chance that no one gets clinched to the championship 4 from that race, because there are 8 drivers who have proven themselves worthy to get to the round of 8, who could lock themselves in. And at that point, if it's one of those 8 guys, you sit there and go, well, better them than if we had someone luck their way into this round and get there. That's the only saving grace I have of that absolutely baffling decision is that, yeah, sure, Austin Dillon, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. could win at Talladega, and it'll probably mean nothing in the long run, actually. It'll probably mean nothing to the championship four. Instead of it being in the round of 12 where there's a bigger chance that someone undeserving can clinch their way to the round of 8 and just take up a spot. That's the only positive I can find out of that, and it's not really much of a positive. It's just kind of like, well, it's luckily too late for it to really ruin everything. And even then, it could still ruin everything. It'd be now, granted, let's put it in this perspective here. If one of those drivers that we're talking about, this nightmare scenario where they ruin everything and somehow get the championship for, if somehow Austin Dillon, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., or any of the non-traditional guys made it to the round of 8, can we even be mad at that point? How did they get there? That would be my biggest question is if they got there, they probably belong there.
It's less to do with if the winner of the race, it's more to do with who survives the Russian roulette, and to put it lightly, of who's going to crash and who's not going to crash. The field's not going to care for who's a playoff guy and who's not a playoff guy. Like Talladega is going to take no prisoners regardless, as playoff driver or not. And if you get caught up in that, let's talk about Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson is a Hall of Fame driver. He is a NASCAR 75 driver already. He is one of the guys that you look at as a future or, first ballot Hall of Famer, undisputed. And his roadblock is Talladega this year. He can have 5 wins, 6 wins, 10 wins this year. It doesn't matter because Talladega is in the way. And we have to think, all right, we know he's going to be finishing 25th and below.
So here's a weird part, because this is what I was getting at earlier with when I said the best super speedway driver wins. And you said best driver. The problem is, for 32 races in a year, I will pick Kyle Larson every single day. But for those 4 races at Daytona and Talladega, Atlanta still feels different to me to say that the skill set still applies there. For those 4 races, who would I rather have in my car? Kyle Larson or Ricky Stenhouse Jr.?
Ricky Stenhouse Jr.
That's the thing right there, is that it does still have an inherent skill set, and there are guys who you don't expect to be up there, but they're always up near the front, because that was what really got me. I watched Corey LaJoie and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. rocket to the front of the field, and open car, Rick Ware Racing, Corey LaJoie was leading laps. That's a storyline that we didn't really get to cover because it didn't matter at the end, but it was interesting to watch. Those cars rocketed to the front, and it's because Ricky Stenhouse Jr., if he attaches himself to the back of your car, you may be in for a wild ride, but you are going to be pushed to the front. It's a skill set in itself, and his 500 is the one I think a lot of people look at and talk about the legitimacy of the 500 not feeling the same. But that was the one where I felt like a skill set got rewarded. And I think it took a lot of credit away from him because of the way it ended too, under caution. No one likes an under caution finish. So, which again is why I'm still a little baffled at people being upset about this one. But Ricky Stenhouse Jr.'s got that skill set, and I feel like to say that it's less special when a guy like that is able to win, I feel like it's disrespectful in a way to the super speedway skill set you have to have. Kyle Larson is skilled everywhere else but super speedways. Kyle Busch is skilled at super speedways. He was up near the front too, but luck doesn't go his way. Unfortunately, think about how long your career is and how many drivers are in the field for as long as you're having your career for 20 years, say. There's about 20 other drivers who are going to be there, and somebody's not going to win a 500. As we said, Dale Earnhardt winning the 500 was so cool because it took 20 years, but we forget that part right there. It took 20 years. Even if you're the best, you're going to end up waiting. And that's where Kyle Busch is right now. If he wins, it'll be the record for how long you can go before you win one. But the best driver not winning is not anything new to Daytona. I would say that that's the only thing I can't really agree on is the best driver not winning. that's just the nature of this race, and that's not something I want to see go away.
Well, let's also keep in mind with if Earnhardt in particular, it was everything and the seagull that kept him from winning the Daytona 500. It wasn't like he hit the. I mean, it wasn't like doing the Gamba Core and not hitting the casino lottery 20 times. No, he was 5 of those he should have won it. 5 of those races that was his for the taking, and you can say that. You can legitimately tell a person back in the day he deserved to win. The wrong guy won that race. Is because Dale Earnhardt was just that good on that day. He should have won countless times, and it was everything but the seagull. Engines, tires, fuel. Oh, again, seagulls.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what they're going to do with the racing here at Daytona. I mean, I feel like we're all in agreement that something has to change. Something has to.
I think what we all wish would happen, and the drivers would be the first ones to say this, is we wish it was in the drivers' hands more.
Mm-hmm.
It was more where a guy has to wheel that thing to victory, and feels like we're far beyond those years now, and that's what really stings whenever we think about it. Is I want to be able to talk about someone making a crazy move, but not making a crazy move that wrecked everybody, making a move that was so gutsy, but they had the skill to pull it off, made the pass, and won. We haven't had that in so long. We haven't had a Daytona 500 where we had that happen. We haven't had Dale Jr. going from sixth to first in the fall at Daytona, in the summer at the time. We haven't had that in a while, and it just feels like these cars are not capable of allowing a driver to do that.
Because even like Hamlin and Truex, that was more because of Kenseth's mistake than it was Hamlin or Truex making the correct move at the time to go out and win that race. You think back, it's like how half of these have been under caution, half of these have been, the most notable would be Cindric blocking Blaney.
Even then, that was pretty risky.
That was very risky. Like, I think I do have a solution. It's what the Xfinity series is at Daytona right now. That's what it is, I think. Because when I watch the Xfinity race, I know that either the first best car or the second best car, depending on whether or not the engine goes boom, is going to win that race. They're still able to maneuver. They're still able to make moves. And yes, this race was able to make maneuvers. Joey Logano had to start at the rear how many times and worked his way back towards the front. You were able to pass. That was different in this 500. And again, this was a solid B+ Daytona 500. But continuing to ride B pluses for your main event, that's tough. That's tough. Obviously, like, I almost have to think of it as like booking, right? Where this is your main event, right? This is the Daytona 500 is the Royal Rumble of NASCAR. It really is. And almost every single year, it feels like the two guys who are supposed to win it send each other over the top rope. And it feels like all throughout the year, like we have a 36 match card on it. And what we have is oftentimes one of the things on the undercard is the best race of the year. When was the last time the Daytona 500 was truly the best race of the year? I would say 2007, 2006, maybe.
I could
sounds about right.
I could hear 2007 for sure. Because when I look back at that one had everything you wanted at the end. Granted, again, it was special now then, but if it happened now, would I still say that? I don't know. I don't know after all these years of similar things.
I think
Um,
look at it more like 2022.
yeah, that's the issue is that we're so far along now, away from days where that was the best race of the year. And I guess to be fair, was it ever consistently the best race every year? I don't know if we could really say that.
That's a fair point.
Like this is it has all the prestige for all the reasons that it does, but I think this is the rare case where this race's reputation did not come from it always being the best race every year. It opened the year with a bang, and that is what it does. Because there are years like '92. What was the best race of the year?
Atlanta.
Yeah,
Atlanta.
you ended with the best race of the year. Um, I
But
think
that was because of I mean, that's because of point circumstance. And I think that's where, that's like having the World Heavyweight Championship after a Royal Rumble, and it's not Roman Reigns being the champion.
yeah, it's I would say that's correct to say. Um, the Daytona 500, it is your Royal Rumble, as you said, and sometimes you look back at those like it was the event of the year. Other times you look back at it as the worst thing you saw the entire year. And I don't think the Daytona 500's quite hit that for a while. It's at its worst, if it's a unentertaining 500, you at least then get to go to Texas and look back at Daytona and go, wasn't that bad. That's a historic thing we've gotten to do, even on a disappointing Daytona year. But this year, we're critical because it's the first thing we've seen. We could very well go throughout the rest of the year with a lot of big races, and this will be one of the worst races of the year. But that means we had a really good year. That's what I get at when I say 92. If we got to a point where we had a point system that made sense and no playoffs, and we reached a 92 again, that would just make the last race automatically the best race of the year because of everything going into it. So I think one of our problems with this Daytona 500, and personally, I don't think we talked about much. What was our storyline going into it? It was Elio Castroneves was one of them, and he wrecked out early. That's
Porter Elio.
yeah,
He had how many times did he get in the wall? I mean, it was
so many times.
the poor guy had a speed week from hell, pretty much. I mean, he got collected in a crash in the duels, gotten in, I think, 3 wrecks in the ARCA race, and none of them were his fault. He just spun in the big one, got clipped by Scott Milton in another, and then AJ Moyer didn't know the race was over and turned Elio head on in the wall. And then also, and then in the 500, Castroneves gets caught up in a wreck and is taken out early.
Can we say officially that this is the worst week for or a driver down at Daytona since Carl Edwards' speed weeks? All those.
Yeah.
It sure feels like it. I mean, he got an education in hard knocks, is what it was.
If Helio Castroneves never runs a NASCAR race ever again, I will not blame him, and I do not blame any IndyCar driver that feels the same way. Let's put it like that. What they need to do is don't even bother trying to repair that car. I need you to melt it. I need that car melted. I need that car melted and buried in Dale Jr.'s graveyard is what that needs to happen. And whatever Wendy's paint scheme, I need you to burn that at concept art too. I need you to burn it because that thing was not a race car. It was a magnet. And for chaos and controversy, poor Trackhouse. If I'm not mistaken, Trackhouse burnt through 7 cars this week.
I read the same thing. That's terrible. That is one of the may be one of the worst weekends I've ever heard for a whole team.
That's $1.75 million down the drain this weekend that we're not even getting into the outside the track stuff. That is 1.75. And honestly, this is a week where if you're Trackhouse Racing, this might be the week that kills your entire season.
I hope for their sake that's not the case. That story was the big one going into this weekend, and I really want to harp on the storyline aspect because I feel like that matters a lot with these races and how we perceive them afterwards. Storyline of Elio Castroneves ended early, so that's one out of the way. A lot of people were looking at Elio wondering how he'd run in the race after winning 4 Indy 500s. The other one, Kyle Busch, 20 years of trying, and it ends with 5 laps to go. He gets taken out. That was your feel-good one for a lot of people who've watched for a very long time, and it gets taken out in a wreck as well. What does that leave you a storyline wise? If you're a fan who was following along in the week and you want to go beyond your favorite driver, you want a sentimental pick, Corey LaJoie becomes one throughout the race. He becomes a sentimental favorite because he's the guy without a contract for the rest of the year. He's the guy on an open ride with Rick Ware Racing of all teams, and he's been at the front. Well, Corey LaJoie gets caught up in a big one, and every storyline you could have cared about and brought you to a better thought process for this race in terms of what was I going to take away from it, they got taken out. If you love Hendrick Motorsports, you love the 24 car, and you love William Byron, you're probably not even really critical of this. You're probably very happy with how this race went. I don't want to make it into a my driver didn't win and that's why I don't like the racing. I don't think that's what it is. It's the intriguing stories all ended the same way. They got wrecked.
Even the one other story that you forgot to mention, Junior Motorsports.
Yeah.
Was Junior, I mean, they finished. Good race.
They finished
Top
in
10. Yeah, nice.
Excellent and debut. Junior's got the bug even more. But was that 40 even a thought throughout the course of the race? Was he even contending? I didn't even see him in the top 10 at any point until the very last lap.
Yeah, they were not a contender by any stretch.
They were not relevant. They were on the lead lap, which about 30 guys were before the big one happened. But they weren't really relevant. And granted, we shouldn't really expect that from a first-time race team. Truex was a narrative, got knocked out in the first wreck. Hey, Bubba Wallace got knocked out in the got basically the motor went boom. You had that thing sitting on the backstretch during the third red flag. Like he caught probably some of the worst damage I've seen. And, initially when you're thinking, how the heck is Bubba Wallace still on the racetrack? And then you see that at radiator and all the water coming out of that car. It's just like, oh, right, there it is. Yeah. It's Kyle Larson too.
You look at all these names that got taken out, and I think that is where the big one really hurts the quality of the race. Is that, we got to the point where we had a restart, and I looked at it and said, we have 30 drivers still out there. That's good, but that's bad.
Yeah.
We're due, is what I got at, and we sure were due. The other storyline I don't think was ever actually a storyline because it's not like he doesn't run races every year with Jimmy Johnson. But before he finished third, I didn't know where he was. He was mid-pack. He somehow found his way there, but no one paid attention to it. You just looked up at the score ticker at the end and said, oh, Jimmy Johnson finished third. How about that?
Well, I think the novelty of Johnson's kind of worn off. It's like, yeah, we kind of expected this. It'll pick up back up for the 600 because that will be 750 races for him, and that will be more than likely it. It might be more, actually, now I'm thinking about it. And I got to double check at what officially number that's going to be for him Cup Series start-wise.
It will be 700, I believe.
Yeah, 700. And I'm sorry. But, 700 on the dot, 375 top 10s, 233 top 5s. He's in 700 races. But he's only got the 2 scheduled. It's a big deal for them. And, we talk about narratives after the race. It's like, yeah, it's fun to see where, part of me is going like, great, this is a wonderful start for Legacy Motor Club in particular. They got 2 guys inside the top 5 right now in the points and all that. And then you just remember, oh, right, we've got this other wild card race now. It's still a long way to go where you can't really dive into the standings, and which is why we don't really have any graphics or anything like that tonight. It's because it's early. We're 1 race in. There's a lot of things that are helping and hurting. For example, Bubba Wallace winning the duel is going to help him out with his point situation, but you really can't, out of the 500, and this is the tough thing about the 500, is the 500's in its own bubble compared to every other race, right? after the Indy 500, you could start looking at the title picture. Daytona 500, you can't do that. With NASCAR, you really can't even do that until after race 10 in these days, just because you got 3 super speedways in the first 10 races of the year.
Yeah.
So I don't want to make the comparison, Sterling, because it's going to hurt both of us. How many people are bored of it because it was the same winner? How many people are bored because they won back to back? William Byron won back to back 500s, and the storyline going the next year will be three-peat. I hate to say the word.
But
I think we feel the same way a lot of people felt about our team going into this season. Because William Byron, again, what kind of football do we play? Boring football, and he is not a entertaining figure. I'm just spitballing here, but people also don't like seeing a guy who is already a dominant racer. He's very good.
well, you guys,
Win 2 years in
you
a
guys
row.
were already heels by the end of last year. You guys had Taylor Swift, you had Kelsey, you
Well,
had
this is all a matter of perspective here. Hendrick Motorsports, for a lot of people, may be the heel organization because they win all the time. I let's put it that way. They have Chase Elliott, everybody loves him, but if you're not a Chase Elliott or Hendrick fan, what do you think of Hendrick Motorsports?
it's not Chiefs, it's Patriots, is what
They are the Patriots.
it's what Hendrick is the Patriots dynasty. What, and let's face it, what the Chiefs would be something like Roger Penske racing. And that's mainly built on the reputation of Logano and Keselowski. He's ghost there, but that's besides the point. And
Yeah.
I think people are viewing this as like, oh, it's bad because we had the same winner. No, this is Switzerland winning the Daytona 500 twice in a row. You're not going to have feelings for or against this driver, not unless you're a William Byron fan directly or a fan of Jeff Gordon. I don't think I know anybody except for maybe Hamlin fans who hate him. And I don't know anybody outside of Byron fans themselves that really exactly love him.
And next year we're going to have that be the storyline heading in, though. Can he do it 3 times in a row? I think we
That's a
should
good
give
story.
him that much right now. As William Byron has won this twice in a row, and he can go for 3 next year. And most importantly, he can go for a title this year, because unless we have 18 winners or something, and William Byron has the worst season of his career after this, he's locked in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And no one, we all had him in our top 5, I think, at least. So this is the year for William Byron to get it done again. We say this every year, I feel like, because he is that good. But I feel like this year, he's really got to drive it home. He's got to be the one to get it done for Hendrick Motorsports.
I think what a problem though, and this may be actually something that maybe is driving things. It's like, okay, we know Byron's good, right? We know Byron is good. We know he's a playoff contender. And I think also the fact is he's good in the early part of the year. So it's like, great. We knew this was going to happen by week 10, right? The narrative in the structure has not changed, right? Coming out of Daytona, we are not entering a new territory than we came into it. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah.
We still have Cody wearing 36, correct?
Yeah, of course.
I have all 16 of my guys who I predicted to make the playoffs still making the playoffs. Is that the same with both of yours?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what has changed coming out of Daytona? What vacuum Daytona is a vacuum in its own. You can look at the points that come out of this race, and those may have consequences later on, but you can't judge it right now. Is there any driver who your opinion has changed after this week?
Not really.
No.
Maybe Riley Herbst for the save.
That save was very good. But I feel like with Riley Herbst, even then, I think we kind of know Riley Herbst can do a thing like that. I will put it this way, and I think with how much different perspectives we've covered here, I'm going to go back to a tweet from Kevin Durant that got retweeted by Jeff Gluck about how fans, this was about the All-Star Weekend in the NBA, which was horrible, how fans will basically find anything and everything to end up complaining about. Now, that's true and sometimes very valid, but other times sometimes it's just for the sake of complaining. We're going to come out of Daytona 500 no matter who won and how the race went. I think we're going to have a lot of complaints from somebody. If, say, Corey LaJoie had won, people would have been happy for him, but then went, Rick Ware Racing has a win, and they couldn't do that anywhere else. It'd be something like that. It'd be something like, oh, great, Austin Dillon won. Now he's going to be locked in the playoffs, and we're stuck with that for the rest of the year. He'll probably wreck his way around a 12, is what a lot of people would say. The only ones I think that would have actually had no complaints at the end would have been Kyle Busch. People would have just been happy for him.
Or Martin Truex or Jimmy Johnson or any really other. Justin Allgaier would have been a popular win for sure.
And that one would have been, I think, actually would have also been one of the most popular because then Junior gets a win as an owner in the Cup Series, and everyone loves that. And those were your best cases for perception, but every other winner, every other way this race could have gone, say they had done the single lane train, we would have had a lot of complaints about that. Say they only did 2 lanes and no one even bothered trying for a 3rd lane, would have had complaints about that. I don't think it really mattered how this race would have gone. People would have been unhappy because we have a perception of the 500 of what it needs to be, which is high octane, always on, always passing, everything's exciting, and the drivers still need to be smart so I don't complain about them doing stupid moves later. It's a high bar that we're never going to reach again.
Well,
because the drivers are humans, and some of them are not as good of drivers as the other ones.
So I guess that leaves a question then. And I'm trying to find the way to phrase it. Should we now lower our expectations for the Daytona 500? Should this now not be treated as the pinnacle, the diamond crown jewel of the NASCAR calendar? Should this be treated like the other 3? If we lower our expectations this high.
I put my expectations higher on the other ones because, well, quite frankly, the Coke 600 I feel like is really set for this kind of car to be more entertaining if they don't cut it short, of course. But it really does depend year by year by what you actually do with that race. The Coke 600 last year could have been the best story of the year, and then we cut it short. The downside is that a crown jewel can really just get a reputation damaged very easily by circumstances outside the racing. 500 should be treated the way I think I treat it, which is I spin a wheel, and I mean it when I do this every year, and you've done it before for this race.
I have.
You spin a wheel, and you see who wins, and that's the way you choose it. It's your pinnacle of, I want to say, dumb sports entertainment. Because you're gonna watch and you're gonna be entertained by the wrecks and chaos more than you are the actual quality of lap by lap action. Until those last 5 laps that we like to talk about as the brain turns off laps, which is what everybody seems to enjoy at the end. You can't treat it the same way you would treat, say, Kansas, where you are watching and you're going, this is actually the top quality racing I'm watching this season. Daytona, I think, is not going to be where you get that because guys don't race in a way that they would race at a Kansas. They turn their brains off. They see the checkered flag in the distance and decide they want to turn everybody to get there or bump everybody out of the way like it's a short track. No. Because of that, I don't think it should have high expectations in terms of quality anymore. Entertainment value, you still will get, but quality, racing quality, I don't think so.
Sterling?
Tough question for me to answer because I think with the way the cars are now, you almost have to lower your expectations. The way the cars are the way they drive on these drafting tracks, Daytona, Talladega, Atlanta, the way they race, the way the drivers maneuver these cars and the moves that they make on the track, you almost have to lower your expectations regarding the quality that we should expect. And it shouldn't be that way. But
it is.
It's what it is right now. I think something should change in the future regarding the cars, regarding how the drivers race, whether it's one or the other, because this product is not sustainable. You cannot keep racing on these drafting tracks like this and expect fans to be, I mean, fans will be, the optics will look good when they're 3 wide, but the drivers can't go anywhere. It diminishes the quality of the racing. We don't want a repeat of 2000 or 2013, but I feel like we've gone too far in the opposite direction.
But is that some? I'm gonna play the devil's advocate. The eyeballs, the casuals. There is a reason why 2 million more people show up to this race than any other race of the year. Probably more. But
I don't know if it's because they're all close together.
Is this a 500 issue? Oh, or is this a super speedway issue? Is what I'm trying to dissect.
Super speedway issue.
Which does affect the 500 too.
I can safely say that last year when we watched that Atlanta race and ended up being a 3 wide finish, that was amazing. And for any casual fan who watched that, that's pretty spectacular, but it also creates that idea. You went from, now we're going to go from the Daytona 500 back to Atlanta. And the expectation for that to happen over and over again is probably what goes into a casual's head after that. This is what every race is. They're all high speed, high octane, and all close together, and they finish so close, and that is an unrealistic expectation for the rest of the season. I would just love, this is now my personal need, I would love for a Daytona 500 where I watch some guys actually pull away. Just once. Just once I want to see some guys actually pull away. But these cars don't do that. I'm not seeing guys slingshot. That's not going to happen with the current setup we've got. And that used to be one of the most exciting things you could see a driver do is slingshot past the lead car and take the lead and pull away. You can't pull away.
So 2-car tandem?
Not 2-car tandem, but someone at least using the draft to get so quick they could go on the outside. And if you dare block them, try it. It would just end up in disaster. That's what we already have. But we aren't going to get anywhere with the current setup because they can't even really pull away. Like, you can try to tandem draft, go ahead. It's not going to work. It's going to be a whole different problem. You could try to do whatever you want drafting-wise outside of the norm, but the norm is going to win right now because there's more of them, and they just go faster than you and save fuel, while you got to go down pit road. They've got 5 more laps to go in their fuel window.
I think the problem I'm having, and I almost feel like we need to get a therapist in here. I really do. Like, I really feel like I need to be lying down on one of those red couches. It's just like trying to describe my feelings about this race because I don't really know how you fix it. In this, I think we pride ourselves on this show, right? Where we try to offer solutions, right? We try to talk about things to help it out, and maybe it's the drag, making less drag, and maybe it's this, or maybe it's that. And with this, I don't know how to fix it because it is both car and culture. The culture of the car, it's where I have problem. It's almost like I have the problem with the NBA right now, where the game has evolved to this 3-point dunking contest that's driving people away. Have we reached that point yet where or the NBA where we've had this drastic dip? No, but I feel like we're getting there. I feel like we're getting into that 2018, 2019 territory in the NBA right after, or the Cavs Warriors trilogy. It feels like that, where we have evolved to the point where that's how it is, right? And we're running into, I don't want to say the next cycle, because I see what the NBA's going to attempt to do, and I know that's not going to work because of what it's the exact same playbook that NASCAR does. I almost feel like if it's the cult, I mean, if we don't fix it now, the culture is what's going to be the death spiral in the long run. If we try to change it in the short term, that's going to be the death spiral in the short term, like we did back in the 2000s. So I just sit here and trying to figure out what to do. And I can't answer that.
I wouldn't worry too much in terms of the sport itself right now until we get further in the year and we have the same problems. I think this was a Daytona 500 issue, and in the long run, yeah, it's a 500 issue, but if you continue to have moments throughout the year that keep drawing people social media wise, viral moments that happen throughout the year, not particularly meaning you go out and wreck people and get viral moments out of flying through the air, but more along the lines of races where you have people going, I wish I didn't miss that.
I'm not talking about NASCAR as a whole. I'm not talking about NASCAR as a whole. I'm talking about super speedways, and I'm talking about the 500. And those two specifically, 500 mainly, super speedways as a bonus.
Super speedways are going to have every problem in the world that we have with them that we already talk about, though. We can't eliminate all of them because the biggest problem is going to come down to dummies at the end driving like idiots and wrecking each other, and that culture problem isn't going to change. That is
long-term death spiral versus if we try to change it, that's the short term. That's what I'm getting at.
I don't know if you can even try to change it with these guys, because when you said boys have at it a long time ago, that meant guys can just go out and get revenge a lot of times. But in this case, these guys are actually just trying to race. And I hate to say it like that because it really does look bad when your version of trying to race puts the guy in front of you in the outside wall. But Cole Custer and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. are just trying to be as aggressive as they can to go win. And I don't think you want to do anything to discourage guys from doing that. Are you going to punish guys for accidentally punting a guy when they're trying to push him to the front?
The thing is, I feel like they almost, I don't know if this is the right word, but trying to follow along with my line of thinking here. They almost feel enabled to do stuff like that because of the car they're driving.
It's like taking more threes in the NBA these days.
I feel like if
they're to prevent that, you know,
if you're going to change the way the drivers race each other, you're going to have to change the car in some way, shape, or form. I don't know specifically what that means. That's the problem. We don't know what the change is. I mean, I can bring up one change, get rid of that smooth underbody.
Yeah.
Maybe add some ride height, do something. I don't know. I'm not an engineer or an aerodynamicist. None of us are. But the way these drivers race with each other, they feel enabled, almost empowered in a sense, to race the way they do because they're comfortable with the cars that they have. The cars, as Denny Hamlin put it on Actions Detrimental, they are too easy to drive right now. And in turn, it's affecting the quality of the racing product that we get at Daytona, at Talladega, at these drafting tracks. And on the flip side, it's also affecting the cars being too easy to drive is affecting the short tracks to where they become, for the most part, snoozers. You have to change it before you can. I mean, you can ask drivers to be more courteous with each other, be more cautious, but that's only going to carry so much. There's only so much that can do because these drivers are racers. They will race each other. They will take any advantage they can get. If they see an opening, they're going to be like Ayrton Senna and be like, by God, there's an opening. I'm going to take it. If gap, car. So you can only carry that for so long because you cannot deny that racers in their nature, they are going to race each other aggressively. They're going to race each other hard. in order to change how they race, you may have to change the very things that they race. And then, maybe then, that changes their driving style, that changes how they race with each other.
I think. Go ahead, Al.
That brings into, unfortunately, another question with the racers.
Yeah, it's just going to bring more and more questions on top of that, and we're not going to know the answers to them right away.
No,
but these are things that we will have to answer in time, if and when any changes are made.
What would they change with the car is that the one thing you can't stop a driver from doing is finding the way to go fastest around a track in that car. And what was that once upon a time was Kyle Busch found out if I get pushed for a whole lap, I go a whole lot faster. That's how we ended up with tandem drafting. And, well, people weren't so happy with that either. Trevor Bayne wins the 500 with that, and we have the same discussion about legitimate winners and such. And that came about because guys found the fastest way to go around, and Trevor Bayne happened to have the best pusher of the bunch. So you're gonna have answers and then more questions to follow that answer, because the one thing we've had so many things happen at Daytona that have caused us to change cars, the way they drive, how they go around. In 2020, there was a conscious decision made after that. These cars shouldn't be going that fast anymore. And they haven't gone nearly as fast since then. And whether that's a good or bad thing is up to what you value in the sport. Valuing safety, I think it's a good thing. But if they went faster, or if there was actually a difference between these cars, maybe we'd see see drivers actually be able to pull away a little bit, not have a giant single massive pack with the secondary pack waiting for them all to crash to try to win. Maybe we would have something different. I don't know. But whatever their change would be, I think they'd be hesitant to try to make them any faster. And I don't know if that's going to do anything if they aren't any faster, or if some of them can go faster.
And
we don't want to see what happens if it goes wrong when they're too fast.
Let's be honest, we're a fickle bunch. We are. And that quote about the All-Star game from Kevin Durant is correct, and it applies to NASCAR fans in particular. It's diminished. The problem is, you watch this for so long, 2026, we're probably going to get the same finish. 2027, we're probably going to get the same finish. 2028, 2029, and on and on and on. It's going to be very interesting to see what goes on in these next couple weeks. Are we going to feel the same after Atlanta? Are we going to feel the same after Talladega? And I think that's the true test. I think for tonight, gentlemen, because we've been on it for a while, I think we got to clear out of the forest. I think we need to get out of the forest, get out of the roots of it. We'll see where it is. It's down the road. Am I going to be excited for 2026's Daytona 500? Absolutely. But the shine of this race, I think the polish is off the 500. I think the polish of the 500 is gone. It's still a crown jewel. It's still the diamond jewel of NASCAR. It's the most prestigious thing you can win in the sport. But it's not the same way Dale Earnhardt won it.
No.
And I think that's the conclusion. It feels like a collective conscious conclusion. It wasn't even like Denny Hamlin said this and the entire fan base is like, oh, wait a minute, hang on. No, this one felt different. It was same. It was the same as 2022 and 2023. Both good races. But it feels different this time around. And I don't know why, but it feels different. Is the end of the discussion, I feel like.
Doesn't feel the way it used to.
No.
That's for sure. So, I mean, yeah, I guess that's where we'll have to leave the discussion. Before we go, as a funny little laugh here, Ryan Preece, that's his new Twitter profile pic.
Yeah, I saw that. I mean, at least he's got a good sense of humor about it. I mean, I'll be honest. If we got Newman as Rocket Man, where are we calling Priest now? What's his nickname? Where are we going to nickname Priest? Because unfortunately for Priest, he's kind of taking that Newman crash dummy role.
I don't know what his nickname would be. I mean, they're both named Ryan Newman, Ryan Priest. There was that Twitter post I saw of the one guy who mentioned every time he took his girlfriend to a race, Ryan had a horrible crash because he took his girlfriend to both the 2020 Daytona 500 and that Daytona July race where Priest went barrel rolling down the backstretch in the grass. So he initially directed it at Ryan Blaney, saying, "If anything happens to you today, I'm sorry." And it ended up being Ryan Priest a second time.
Yeah.
Maybe just get your own ticket next time.
Maybe. I mean, poor Ryan Priest. I mean, it's not even just Daytona; it's Kansas as well.
Yeah,
When
he's had some
violent
really
hit,
rough crashes. I mean,
yeah,
glad he can keep a sense of humor about it, but still, it's got to be tough. But hopefully, Atlanta goes better for him and for everybody. Atlanta produced a really good race last year, hoping for another good race this time around. But we'll talk about that later this week. There's some other news to discuss regarding some rides and other things that have happened in the world of motorsports, and we'll break it all down later this week on Wednesday, February 19th for the next edition of the Burn and Rubber Racing Podcast. But until then, that's all for tonight. We thank you for watching or listening to our Daytona 500 recap, breakdown, discussion, whatever you want to call it, for these last couple hours. We appreciate your viewership or your listening ears, wherever you may be. Please take care of yourselves and each other, and be kind to one another and yourself out there. On behalf of my co-hosts Hallie Stepp and Justin Palmer, until next time, this is Sterling Price signing off.